Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Pigskin Glory, football 50 years ago. Tonight, we are wrapping up the month of April 1976. And what a fascinating month it was around the NFL world. The NFL draft shaped the future of the league. Rookie camps began opening across the country, and teams started signing draft picks while preparing for the coming season. We also saw growing conversation about free agency, with player movement as May 1st approached, several major names prepared to become available. Never before in the history of the NFL had that happened. This month also gave us a real snapshot of the sports world in 1976 through the pages of Sports Illustrated and Football Digest, as we detailed them like we hadn't before. From off-season football debates to old-school merchandise ads, television schedules, and even some wild headlines that absolutely could only happen in the 1970s. And tonight, all three members of Pigskin Glory crew are here. Joining us from Wisconsin, ready to break down the transactions, signings, and some of the interesting names preparing to hit free agency, wearing a Nintendo 64 shirt, Chris.
Greetings.
Also joining us, Charles is back with us from California, and now that baseball season is underway in April of 1976, I'm sure he'll have a few thoughts about what was happening on the diamond and around the sports world besides football for April of 1976. And lastly, joining us is Mark from Pennsylvania. Mark is the only one who may have slight recollection of 1970s, but barely. He's not that old.
Hi.
So, as we always do, we're going to go over to the Facebook page, and we're going to go through the dates. When I get to the daily recaps, I'll ask questions. If you want to see these newspaper headlines, you can follow Pigskin Glory, Football 50 Years Ago Today on Facebook, to get updated information. I'll go through the day, and at the daily recap, I'll stop and ask a panelist a question. We have expansion draft teams, and as the NFL finished that up at the end of March, two new teams took opposite approaches in drafting their players. Also on April 1st, the New York Giants named an assistant in charge of research and development, John McVay. The Joe Cap case reaches a boiling point as the antitrust case nears its conclusion, as that was part of the major headlines in the month of March. It's coming to a close. And as I said, Football Digest with Lynn Swann of the Pittsburgh Steelers on the cover. We take a look day by day, dive into this episode, look at the stories and the ads from Football Digest. New teams, big moves, and a league in transaction. The NFL's newest franchises, Seattle, Tampa Bay, officially began to take shape as the results of the expansion draft came into focus. Veteran players from across the league were selected, forming the foundation of two teams preparing for their first seasons. It wasn't about stars, it was about building identity from the ground up. Around the league, movement wasn't limited to the field. The New York Giants added to their front office, naming John McVay to oversee research and development, another sign that teams were beginning to evolve behind the scenes as well. Meanwhile, in the courtroom, tension reached a peak in the Joe Cap antitrust case. With closing arguments delivered, a verdict now looms in the battle that could impact players' rights for years to come. And as the new month begins, Football Digest hits newsstands, featuring Lynn Swann and the champion Pittsburgh Steelers, a reminder of the standard the rest of the league is chasing. From expansion to innovation to legal battles, April of 1976 is off to a fast start. Mark, let's start with you. What are your takeaways from the expansion draft and how that unfolded with Seattle and Tampa Bay officially opening their rosters?
I think that's going to be interesting. It's going to dilute a little bit of the talent. I mean, there's still a lot out there, but when you start taking these NFL teams that are coming in, you're taking away probably a player or two from each team, and that makes it a little harder for those veteran teams to replace. And it'll be interesting to see if any of these teams can survive the first couple of years or if they're going to fold.
Anybody have anything else to add to that?
Yes, because it's been a while since we had a pure expansion draft like the Saints and the Vikings. Like Tampa and Seattle with who they're trying to select, they're just hoping they can, kind of luck out like Minnesota did when they got Fran Tarkenton and Jim Marshall. The Bucs and Seahawks are hoping they can find their equivalent because those guys are still playing.
As the full expanded draft when Major League Baseball goes through the expansion, the area affected the most is pitching because expansion week, those weaken the pitching staff. Which in the NFL, which is affected the most with expansion trade? The offensive line, defensive line, or what?
Interesting points. For me, the expansion draft is a risky venture when your team does not protect to certain players. And as the Baltimore Colts found out, Mike Curtis is now gone as he has been moved to the Seattle Seahawks. And that is a big loss for the Colts and a huge gain for the Seahawks entering 1976.
Now, historically, we all lived through a lot of these other expansion years, like when Carolina and Jacksonville and the Houston Texans came in. The ensuing seasons were very high scoring, so you figured maybe a couple more touchdowns will be scored in '76.
Yeah. Moving on to April 2nd, which I believe in 1976 was a Friday, April 2nd. Steve Spurrier is heading to Tampa Bay. We'll detail that trade a little bit more. There's more on the Jim Plunkett situation as the Patriots are denying that they're going to trade him. And the Bills face some defensive changes following expansion loss. Green Bay was busy signing players on April 2nd. The Packers are taking a gamble trading for Lynn Dickey from the Houston Oilers, as that is a move that could be a huge game changer. And in the pages of Football Digest, we start off looking at the ads and also the contents as we get into the month slowly but surely in Football Digest. Okay, so Football Digest, again, you can go to Pigskin Glory and take a look at that. Let's take a look back at how April 2nd factored out. The expansion ripple effect continued across the NFL, and the quarterback carousel is starting to spin. Steve Spurrier is heading to Tampa Bay. The Buccaneers make a major move acquiring the 49ers quarterback. The young franchise continues building its identity, looking for leadership under center as the inaugural season approaches, adding the old ball quarterback, ball passer. He's not a ball coach yet. Trade markets heating up. The Raiders and Chargers swap defensive pieces, and another sign of teams reshaping post-expansion. The Saints add quarterback help, while multiple teams shuffle depth and draft capital. Buffalo's defensive line could be entering a transition phase as roster changes continue. The rumors of the Jim Plunkett trade are being denied by the New England Patriots. New England denies dealing Jim Plunkett to San Francisco. The situation remains one to watch as the trade freeze lifts. Green Bay staying active as they continue adding depth through free agent signings and quietly rebuilding areas of the roster. Well, with expansion teams pulling talent across the league, contenders and rebuilders alike are being forced to adapt quickly. Every move, big or small, is shaping what 1976 will look like. Charles, you're a 49ers fan. If you were sitting there reading the papers on this day in 1976, how would you feel about the Patriots coming out denying the fact that they have traded Jim Plunkett to San Francisco?
I don't know why. I don't know why the Patriots with the nine is here. But I would love to get a chance to bring the hometown kid who plays college football or high football in the Bay Area back home to roost.
Chris and Mark, what do you think of that?
Well, Spurrier's been with the 49ers since 1966. It's almost been a decade, so you kind of had to figure that, well, eventually they're going to have to move on from him. So it's going to help Tampa because if you're going to be an expansion team, you need a quarterback who's been around the league for a little bit. See David Carr or Kerry Collins, when they had to start out of the gate, that didn't work out so well.
Okay, we're moving on to Saturday, April 3rd now, and right off the bat, we're going to start. The Joe Cap verdict is in. He loses. More about that at the end of the day. The quarterback carousel is in full swing. As we've talked about, Spurrier to Tampa. Hadel is moving on to the Houston Oilers. Dickey's heading to Green Bay, and Bobby Douglas is out of nowhere going to New Orleans. The Bills send Walt Patulski to St. Louis, and more domino effect in action. We still don't have a definitive word on Jim Plunkett. But the Colts are adding Bill Troop to their quarterbacking list to back up Burt Jones, as well as sending defensive back Mike Washington in a draft pick onto the Eagles. More fallout from the expansion draft. More on the Bills trading Walt Patulski to St. Louis. This is a big loss for Buffalo fans, especially as you can see, the Sabres are heading to the playoffs to take on St. Louis. So odd that the Bills would trade a member to St. Louis as the Sabres are getting ready to play the St. Louis Blues. More information is Charlie Joyner has been traded to San Diego in a surprising move. And then Football Digest talks about the Tom Landry and how Staubach was the key in their Super Bowl run. You can again read more on that and read the caption if you go to Pigskin Glory. The NFL hits a turning point kind of day. Decisions, movement, and consequences all at once. Cap loses in court. Joe Cap's antitrust case against the NFL comes to an end, and not in his favor. A federal jury rules for the NFL, denying Cap any damages in his claim that the league forced him out. The twist, the court acknowledged issues with NFL rules, but ruled Cap failed to prove he was personally damaged. Meaning the system may be flawed, but this wasn't the case to break it. The quarterback movement from earlier in the week is now fully taken shape. Steve Spurrier is now in Tampa. John Hadl goes to Houston. Lynn Dickey to Green Bay. Bobby Douglas to New Orleans. This isn't just movement. This is teams redefining themselves overnight, especially the expansion Buccaneers. The Buffalo Bills make a move as they send Walt Patulski to St. Louis. Former number one overall pick is gone from Buffalo. It's signaling a shift in Buffalo's defensive identity. Part of the broader roster reshuffling happening league-wide. More deals across the league as the Colts regain quarterback Bill Troop. Mike Washington is dealt in the same move. The Bengals acquire Coy Bacon, sizzling up their defensive front. The Chargers land Charlie Joyner. Quietly, some of these moves, especially Joyner, will have long-term impact beyond what anyone realizes on that day. Football Digest feature of the day, Tom Landry reflects on Dallas' Super Bowl run. He named Staubach was the key. A reminder that even in a run-heavy era, elite quarterback leadership is becoming the difference maker. The big picture on April 3rd shows us three major truths about the NFL at this moment. The league still controls player movement. Teams are aggressively reshaping through trades, and the quarterback position is becoming central to success. The NFL wins in the courtroom, but cracks are there. It'll take time, but change is coming. Chris, what are your thoughts on the Joe Cap case?
It's kind of crazy to think that this all started, it's great. He leads Minnesota to a Super Bowl, and then he inexplicably goes to New England for 1 year, and he hasn't been in the NFL since then, and it makes you wonder, all he had to do was just stay in Minnesota, and this never would have happened. Sometimes you think he's wondering, what was I thinking?
Technically, he went to Boston. That was 1970, and they were still the Boston Patriots for 1 year, but yeah, it was weird to see a Super Bowl quarterback, win or lose, be on a different team the very next year. That is my Beagle, folks, making his monthly addition to the show. Anybody else have any thoughts on April 3rd before we move on?
In some ways, this Joe Cap losing the case is similar to Kurt Floyd losing his baseball case in the Supreme Court. But then the cracks started to show there as well. And as we saw in December, Ernie Nevers and Dave McNally were granted free agency in baseball. And Ernie Nevers in a couple of days will sign with the Atlanta Braves for 3 years and a team that's under new ownership by one Ted Turner. Remember that name in more ways than one.
All right, moving on. We have the weekly recap. This goes back to March 28th. The headline of the story, expansion taken over. We've talked about it. The expansion draft for the 27th and 28th NFL franchises, Tampa and Seattle. They began building their rosters the old school way, picking through unprotected veterans across the league. Each team selected 39 players. Teams protected 32. Strategy becomes everything, youth versus experience. This wasn't just a draft. It was a league-wide reshuffling of talent. Behind the curtain, it was a selective process. The process itself was practically classified. Teams are given limited time to evaluate lists. Picks and protections kept completely secret. Even the two expansion teams didn't know each other's moves. A fascinating look at how controlled and guarded the NFL machine was in 1976. We have major moves throughout the league. Steve Spurrier to the Buccaneers, John Hadl to the Oilers, Lynn Dickey to the Packers, Charlie Joyner and Coy Bacon are traded. Buffalo trades Walt Patulski to St. Louis, a signal that Buffalo is reshaping its roster too. On the field and in the record books, looking back through 1975, Chuck Foreman set running back reception record with 73. Ken Burrow was the top 1,000-yard receiver. Lynn Swann among the TD leaders. The game is evolving. Running backs catching passes. Offenses opening up. The Cap case, the NFL wins for now. Joe Cap's lawsuit against the NFL came to a close. Jury rules in favor of the NFL. Caps received no damages. The court acknowledges issues, but no proof of harm, meaning the league keeps control. But the idea of players' rights is now on the table. From the pages of Football Digest, we took a look at Tom Landry reflecting on their Super Bowl run. This week shows the NFL at a crossroads. Expansion reshapes the league. Veterans shuffled across rosters, quarterbacks becoming central figures. Legal battles begin challenging league control. The foundation of the modern NFL is quietly being built. Final thought, the league looks stable on surface, but between expansion chaos, player movement, and courtroom tension, change is coming. Guys, this was a wild week in 1976, the end of March, beginning of April. No games played, but football was in the headlines more than it should be in the offseason, especially in the 70s.
Especially in an era without 24/7 coverage.
And the fact on April 2nd, the Oakland A's, with 9 players scheduled to become free agents, Charlie Finley dropped a bomb on April 2nd, trading slugger Reggie Jackson and left-hand pitcher Ken Holtzman to Baltimore for Mike Torres and Don Baylor.
Moving on to Sunday, April 4th, there's more news about the quarterbacks. This is becoming a daily thing. Even several days after guys like Steve Spurrier have moved on, the newspapers are still talking about them, showing you just how important the quarterback position is becoming heading into 1976. And in Football Digest, the fans speak out. This is one of the favorite issues, and if we are still around doing 50 years past 1991, we'll even see yours truly in the Fans Speak Out section.
Whoa.
Calvin Hill signs with the Washington Redskins. One of the biggest names of the decade has joined the enemy, so to speak, as a Cowboy becomes a Redskin.
Oh, my dad not going like that.
Yeah.
Plus, the football world says goodbye to a player who spanned some of the NFL's earliest and most formative years, as Lou Gordon passed away, a member of the Chicago Cardinals, Brooklyn Dodgers, Chicago Cardinals again, Green Bay Packers, and Chicago Bears.
Charles, is any relation to the former American League MVP, Joe Gordon?
I'm not sure.
All right, so coming April 4th comes to an end. Let's take a look. What started as a quiet Sunday turned into a day with some meaningful development across the league. Calvin Hill signing with Washington. The biggest headline of the day, Calvin Hill finds a new home in Washington. Head coach George Allen continues to lean into his veteran-heavy philosophy, adding an experienced and versatile back who, if healthy, could still make an impact in 1976. Quarterbacks shuffle, still settling. The aftershocks from Friday's trade frenzy continues to ripple through the league. Moves involving Spurrier, Hadel, Dickey, and Douglas remain the dominant storyline as teams begin to adjust roles and expectations. Expansion effects linger as Seattle and Tampa Bay's arrival is still being felt. Roster depth across the league has shifted, and teams are continuing to react to who they lost and what they still need. Remembering Lou Gordon, the football world also pauses to remember Lou Gordon, a player from the NFL's early era whose career spanned multiple franchises in the 1930s. A reminder of the league's roots during a time of major transition in 1976. And from Football Digest, the fans speak out. Even in a quieter news cycle, the voices of fans remain loud. Debates over Super Bowl X, quarterback decisions, and player greatness show one thing clearly: some arguments never change. The big picture, April 4th isn't about volume, it's about context. A key veteran signing, a league still adjusting to major news, and connections back to football's earliest days. The NFL may have caught its breath, but the offseason momentum is still very much alive. Chris, Calvin Hill going to Washington, how big is that?
This is absolutely huge because, A, Cowboy joining a Redskin, that's tantamount to like if a Bills signed with the Dolphins or if a Steelers signed with the Raiders.
Or the Red Sox going to the Yankees.
Exactly.
Okay, we move on to Monday, April 5th. The jury members explain their reasons for the Joe Cap decision. We have offensive dominating the NFL draft pool as more offensive talent seems to be available for the draft. And from Football Digest, Lynn Swann discusses how the Steelers won. Plus, it was Easter in 2026, and Pigskin Glory wished everybody a happy Easter. From Sports Illustrated, Monday brings Sports Illustrated, and on the cover this week, Great Scott, it's Indiana. Football's not going to get the headline picture every day, but let's take a look inside the issue to see what is in there. There is chaos in sports as contract battles between players and owners are becoming the norm. Even the New York Giants executive Andy Robustelli warns the old days are gone. This is the new normal. John Madden talks about protecting quarterbacks and how the league needs to do more. Plus, we have a quote of the day from Barry Switzer, the Oklahoma coach. Well, since we're 54-3-1 with it, I suppose we will, talking about the wishbone offense. You can find out that and more by going to Pigskin Glory and taking a look at the pictures shared on the Facebook page. April 5th, a Monday, gave us a strong look at football from 3 different angles: the courtroom, the draft room, and the magazine rack. The Joe Cap case, why the jury ruled against him. A few days after the verdict, jurors made their reasoning clear in Joe Cap's antitrust lawsuit against the NFL and the Patriots. They believed Cap walked away from football. Cap argued he was forced out after refusing to sign the standard player contract in 1971. The jury saw it differently, deciding he ended his own NFL career by refusing to sign. That ruling reinforces the reality of 1976 football. The league still controls player movement, and even if parts of the system are being challenged, they are not being overturned here. We take a look ahead at the draft. Offense has the edge. As the draft approaches, scouting reports suggest this class is deeper on offense than defense. Running backs and wide receivers, and we talked about that in our fall issue episodes, talking about how much running backs were involved. They are especially strong position in this year's draft. While defensive help appears harder to find, that means team hunting offense may feel comfortable, while teams needing defense like the Bills could be forced to dig deeper or reach. In other words, the shape of the draft is starting to come into focus. Football Digest, Lynn Swann tells how the Steelers won Super Bowl X. In this issue, he gives readers an inside account of Super Bowl X from his perspective, the MVP's performance. It's one of the best football reads of the day. Swann says recovering from a concussion just before the game, how Pittsburgh attacked Dallas, the deep shots and key moments that changed the game, and how he turned one of the biggest stages in football into an MVP performance. It's a reminder that Super Bowl X was not just a championship game. It was a defining performance from one of the era's most electric stars. Sports Illustrated, the game is changing. This week's Sports Illustrated is not football on the cover, but it still delivered some fascinating football insight inside. Among the most interesting notes, growing labor and contract tensions in pro sports is described as the new normal. John Madden is already arguing quarterbacks need more protection after they release the ball. And Barry Switzer drops a line of the issue when asked if Oklahoma will stick with a wishbone. Well, since we're 54-3-1, I suppose we will.
We got a job to do. We got to do it, baby.
That's a great snapshot of 1976 old school confidence, but also signs that the sport is evolving. Mark, the Joe Cap case did not go Joe Cap's way, and the jury now tells us Joe Cap is to blame for that.
Yeah, they said he walked away. I understand to some extent where they're coming from. He had a contract he could have signed. He wasn't. He said okay, and he could have looked elsewhere, and he chose not to. And he said, "Okay, I'm done."
Anybody else have any thoughts on Joe Cap?
Charles mentioned the Curt Flood situation earlier. Now Curt Flood, that was the Philly situation. Now this one's a little different because remember Curt Flood didn't want to sign with the team he was traded to. This is a little different from the Curt Flood situation.
That's where I was going to get to and under baseball's reserve clause, which was struck down, a player may not quit one team and bargain with another.
Okay, moving on to Tuesday, April 6th. Charles, this is the big news you've been waiting for. Jim Plunkett is officially traded to the 49ers. We'll get to that in the recap. Plus, new Buccaneers quarterback Steve Spurrier talking about how they're putting in the hands of a familiar name. He did play college ball for the Florida Gators just upstate.
Won a Heisman.
Lean Pickens in the NFL draft, according to Chicago Bears general manager Jim Finks. There's not a lot of talent out there. You're really going to have to dig deep. And another of the men from the old NFL has passed away, as Bruce Gerke from the New York Giants in 1948 has passed on. Another one, remembering Frank Bausch, a member of the Boston Braves / Redskins, Chicago Bears, and Philadelphia Eagles. And in Football Digest, it's the post of the day is "This one was super," talking about Super Bowl X itself. Well, let's take a look at the day in a whole. A full day across the football world, past, present, and remembered. Quarterback movement and new beginnings. Jim Plunkett begins a new chapter with the 49ers after a major trade from New England. Steve Spurrier lands in Tampa Bay as the expansion franchise continues to take shape. Two former high-profile quarterbacks, both looking for fresh starts in 76. Spurrier is spotlighted as Tampa Bay is already building excitement around Spurrier. The former Heisman Trophy winner expected to bring leadership to a brand new franchise, a key piece in that Buccaneers' early identity. The message is clear. Tampa is all in on building around him. From the pages of Football Digest, like I said, a look back at Super Bowl X reminds us just how this line between victory and defeat can be. Terry Bradshaw connects with Lynn Swann on a historic 64-yard touchdown. Reggie Harrison delivers a game-changing blocked punt for a safety, and the Pittsburgh Steelers secure their place in the NFL's emerging dynasty. And tucked inside, an incredible piece on 1976 fan culture. The NFL helmet radio lamp, a true vintage collectible today. Remembering the game's builders today also reminds us of the men who helped build the league. Bruce Gerke, former New York Giants end and lifelong contributor to athletics. Frank Bausch, center for the Boston Braves, Redskins, Chicago Bears, and Philadelphia Eagles, and a member of the legendary 1940 Chicago Bears. New beginnings, historic greatness, and honoring those who came before. That's the heartbeat of football. And Charles, Jim Plunkett's a 49er.
And it's definitely a fresh beginning for him after playing only 5 games last year because of a separated left shoulder, his non-throwing shoulder. And while he did lead the league in interception in 1974, the Patriots, maybe him coming home will boost his confidence and let's face it, that Jim Plunkett may have some faults, but he'll be a major upgrade over the college coaches, quarterback that we've had over the last couple of years. Spurrier, Tom Owen, you name it.
And the emergence of Steve Grogan means New England had a reason to move on from him. Now they have their guy.
Yep, and speaking of the Patriots, the Patriots are going to have more than Steve Grogan in the upcoming NFL draft.
Speaking of the draft, it's Wednesday, April 6th. Is that right? We're on Wednesday now?
Yep.
I've lost count. Yep, Wednesday, okay. And NFL transactions, Denver, St. Louis, and Washington are active. And former WFL talent are on the move too. NFL's draft dodge is tiresome. A strong opinion piece from columnist Bob Ryan aims at the growing spectacle of the NFL draft and how it's becoming a show, and he's tired of it. Well, Bob Ryan, I hope you're not looking nowadays, especially since for a long point in his career, he was part of the spectacle on ESPN. Paul Warfield is returning home. He's going back to Cleveland. That is April 7th. Did we move on? Oh, no, we're on April 7th. I apologize. Paul Warfield is going back to Cleveland. Football Digest, we look at the post of the day. It's an ad for championship commemorative mugs. All right, a quieter day on the surface, but underneath, the league shifting. Teams preparing and voices starting to push back on what the NFL is becoming. Transactions around the league. Movement continues as teams finalize rosters before the draft. The Denver Broncos add linebacker Jeff Geiser and guard Cornelius Johnson. The St. Louis Cardinals acquire linebacker Rodrigo Barnes from Miami, and Washington signs a former NFL defensive backs. You can feel it. Teams searching for depth, plugging holes, and taking chances before the draft day arrives. Draft day criticism is growing louder. Columnist Bob Ryan takes aim at the NFL draft and doesn't hold back. He calls it overhyped, overcomplicated, and more spectacle than substance. And honestly, even in 1976, you can see the blueprint of what the draft would become. The machine is growing, and not everyone likes it. Paul Warfield is heading back to Cleveland. One of the biggest stories of the day, Warfield signs a 3-year deal with the Cleveland Browns, returns to the team that originally drafted him, brings championship experience from Miami. He believes he still has the speed and playmaking ability, and Cleveland is betting on it. This is leadership. This is legacy. This is unfinished business, he says. Football Digest features Super Bowl X, a deep dive into the biggest games of the era, and the vintage memorabilia spotlight on the mugs. April 7th isn't about one massive headline. It's about a league evolving, draft becoming a spectacle, and veterans returning home, dynasties strengthening, and fans finding ways to stay connected. Chris, tell me what's your thoughts on the spectacle and hype of the NFL draft in 1976 and just how prophetic Bob Ryan is when looking ahead to the future.
Well, keep in mind, we're still 4 years away from our first televised draft, so if you think it's overhyped now, wait till we get to the first televised draft. As for Paul Warfield, Vinny, I'm sure you're kind of happy to know that he's not coming back to Miami.
And somewhere in Baltimore, a young Mel Kiper Jr. is researching the draft and will make that overhyped spectacle his career.
Who the hell is Mel Kiper?
Thursday, April 8th, NFL transactions. As always, the New York Giants are out there signing players, and they add a wide receiver named Elmo Wright. I'm sure you've heard of him. The Jets are re-signing Bob Stein. The Falcons acquiring a guy. We'll look more at that at the end. Bill Arnsparger, he is part of the big headline as Larry Zonka is heading to New York. Bill Arnsparger was a major part, the Giants head coach, who was a Dolphin assistant. Tampa. It's the draft. Tampa picks Leroy Selman to open the NFL draft. The future of the franchise decided with one pick. We'll take a look at more on the draft as we go on. And Lynn Swann is set for a summer showcase. The MVP of the Super Bowl brings notoriety and fame as he will now serve as the honorary chairman for the National Watts Summer Games in Los Angeles. From the pages of Super Bowl 10, they asked the question, should Dallas have run the ball more? Earlier in the issue, they talked about Roger Staubach being the key, and now they look at whether or not they should have run more. The NFL draft takes center stage. The biggest headline of the day, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are set to select Leroy Selman with the number 1 overall pick. Tampa ready to build its foundation. Seattle is expected to follow with running back Chuck Muncie. But maybe not. The draft was delayed due to legal battles with the NFLPA. A massive first-round order is set with multiple teams holding key picks. The future league is about to change overnight. Around the league, the New York Giants finalized a deal bringing in Larry Zonka. Head coach Bill Arnsparger, former Dolphin assistant, was a key factor. Lynn Swann will be a celebrity all over the place in the summer, especially at the Southern California Summer Games. Star power continues to grow even in the offseason. Teams continue last-minute roster shaping, draft picks finalized, and trade positioning locked in. Scouting reports highlight names like Tony Galbraith and Larry Gordon. This is the calm before the storm. Football Digest talks about Super Bowl 10 should Dallas have run more. Meanwhile, the Pittsburgh Steelers dominated physically. Franco Harris controlled the tempo, and Lynn Swann delivered explosive plays. A powerful reminder from the pages, Rocky Blair's story featured prominently. Vietnam veteran turned Super Bowl champion, one of the greatest comeback stories in sports. And in the ads, we got helmet radios and lamps, championship commemorative mugs, strategy books for fans, sports-themed action watches. Mark, the Giants signing Larry Zonka. We've heard all offseason and in the end of last season about the WFL players. Did anybody expect the Giants to land probably the biggest name in all of the WFL?
No, I can't imagine that anybody would have expected that. That's to me, it seems to me like it's got to be a gift for the Giants.
And by the way, what a gift for Vinny. Zonka, Warfield, Miami's ripe for the plucking.
Moving on to April 9th with the first overall pick from the previous night, we officially now know, as we heard the day before, that Leroy Selman is a Buccaneer. There's more transactions going on as the Redskins, Rams, and Buccaneers are continuing. The Browns and Patriots making a trade. Raiders trading. Draft day brings a lot of trade. The Raiders are trading Gerald Irons to Cleveland. The Saints end up with Chuck Muncie, not Seattle, like we thought would happen, as they passed on him. And San Diego taking Oklahoma running back Joe Washington. That's a huge move. The Patriots selecting quarterback Mike Haynes. Richard Todd going to the New York Jets. Archie Griffin being drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals. The 49ers select Randy Cross. Now, there's a name you might want to remember, as that's not just a sleeper pick. The Rams pick a guy who all of us got to see play because he played for 20 years, Jackie Slater. Houston taking Mike Barber, tight end, looking to replace Rich Castor. The St. Louis Cardinals select wide receiver Pat Tilley. A lot of big names coming. We have.
Oh, by the way, I want to also mention in that Mike Barber piece, the Oilers also drafted some guy named Steve Largent. What's going to become of him?
There are huge selections being taken everywhere. Running backs, we knew there was going to be a wave of them. They went hard. And in Football Digest that day, we take a look at Chuck Noll and how he stands his ground, and he defends his decision not to punt. April 9th, the draft took center stage, dominated by one thing, the NFL draft. And right from the top, the tone was set. Leroy Selman going number 1 overall to Tampa Bay. Defense, not offense, opens the draft. Expansion teams immediately shaping their identities. Tampa doubled down on both defenses. They would end up selecting both Selman brothers. The Saints shocked the room, grabbing Chuck Muncie, capitalizing on Seattle's passing. The New York Jets take Richard Todd, figuring an Alabama quarterback worked out for them well in 65. Why not try it again? The Cleveland Browns landing Mike Pruitt. And the Cardinals, Joe Sullivan, gives us a voice of defining draft quotes. We went for people we thought might make our football team. Sounds simple, but that's 1970s in a nutshell. Less hype, more roster building. Skilled players start flying as Archie Griffin, still a major storyline. Muncie, as we said, a surprising pick. Mike Pruitt strengthens Cleveland. Joe Washington electrifying San Diego. This was truly the year of the running back. Houston adding tight end Dave Barber. The Los Angeles Rams go with defense Kevin McClain. The 49ers focusing on the offensive line and Randy Cross. Underrated storylines, the Patriots quietly rebuilding post-Plunkett. Chargers thrilled with their Joe Washington pick. Lions are happy on both sides of the ball, Hunter and Gaines. Mid-round picks see potential starters. Draft wasn't just stars, it was building depth. Washington signs WFL talent, league crossover still relevant. This shows how fluid team building in 1976 was. From Football Digest, Chuck Noll defends his reason to not punt, while the future, Football Digest reminds us winning football looks like. April 9th tells a complete football story. Expansion teams building identities, established teams reloading, running backs dominating value. Charles, what do you think about the big names going and Seattle passing on Chuck Muncie?
And as far as the Seahawks and the Bucks go, you got to start building a foundation. When one player does not a winning team make, you got to start taking small steps, especially when you know you're not going to be a Super Bowl contender overnight. And maybe the Seahawks might see something flawed about Chuck Muncie that other teams might not.
By the way, I want to mention the Archie Griffin. Think about the only 2-time Heisman Trophy winner goes to a team that already went 11-3 last year with an average running game, and you're adding a 2-time Heisman winner. That's a scary thought.
Moving on to Saturday, April 10th. The draft ended the night before. The Giants selected Harry Carson. Remember that name in years to come. We have wide receiver Earl Bashnagel reflecting on his mood on the draft. Other things were going on. The NFL transactions don't stop as Washington signing an end. New England is making trades. Buffalo and San Diego involved in a trade on April 10th. More draft notes and oddities. Montana State sends talent to the NFL. Small school, big impact with 2 players being drafted. Here's a look. You can go see the entire 17 rounds on Pigskin Glory. Jim Kane, a member of the Rochester Jeffersons, passed away at the age of 79. From the pages of Football Digest, the Cowboys blast the Steelers as cheap shot artists in this issue. All right. So April 10th. The 76 draft rolls on, and while the early rounds grab headlines, the deeper story is becoming clear. The teams are building identities. Future stars are quietly being found. Chris posted a spotlight story on Harry Carson and why this matters. Not every star comes out of the first round. The bigger picture from the day, expansion teams continuing building depth, established teams fill key needs, and the closing line, the headlines belong to the first round, but the future is being built in rounds like these. Chris, what made you go out and find the story on Harry Carson?
Well, when you look at us, the drafters, you're always looking for, well, how many future stars or well-known players are taken beyond the first round? Like, I mentioned Harry Carson, guys like Pat Tilley, Jackie Slater, Steve Largent. Not every future Hall of Famer is going to be selected on day 1.
I'm not going to go through the weekly recap because we just did the week. You can always rewind and hear more, or go to Pigskin Glory to find it. Sunday, April 11th, more roster moves as the New York Giants are staying busy as they signed several players. The Cowboys adding a running back to their backfield in Mike Mauser. The Giants made their move, and they landed superstar Larry Zonka. More on this on Sunday's newspapers. And from the pages of Football Digest today, Joe Namath, a Super Bowl cornerstone. He talks about his big win in Super Bowl III, and you can read that by going to Pigskin Glory. Let's take a look at Sunday, April 11th. The NFL Draft is in the books. Rosters are shifting, and across the league, the past is still shaping the present. Zonka to the Giants is still the big story. Could this be the answer for New York? The Giants are searching for identity, and Zonka brings power running, toughness, and star appeal. Plus, he played his college ball in the state of New York at Syracuse. But after time away from the NFL, can he still be that guy? Post-draft movement continues as the Giants sign several players, and the Cowboys sign running back Mike Mauser. The message is clear. The draft was just step one. Roster building never stops. In Football Digest, Joe Namath, a Super Bowl cornerstone. This is a story of why the modern NFL exists the way it does, and Joe Namath was a big part of that. Namath said words that will echo forever, "We're going to win. I guarantee it." And he delivered. Why it matters in 76, the AFL proved it belonged. The merger became validated, and the AFC is now a legitimate power. In fact, the AFC has gone on to dominate the Super Bowl run ever since. Namath didn't just win a game, he forced the entire football world to change how it thought. Off the field, the business of football. Team merchandising, mail order fandom is growing, and football is no longer just played on Sundays. The bigger picture on April 11th, the future. Draft picks, roster moves, the present. Teams like the Giants still searching for identity. Charles, what's your take as the draft is now in the history books?
This is very easy top picks here. I find you mentioned Joe Namath because the sixth overall pick is now Richard Todd, and he's going to have some pretty good shoes to fill when Joe Namath retires. Richard Todd is going to take over. But I think the team that might have the best overall draft. Keep an eye on the Patriots. Mike Haynes, defensive back, number 5th pick. Pete Brock, a center, 12th overall pick out of the Buffaloes. Then you have Tim Falk, defensive back from the Buckeyes. And finally, at running back out of Arkansas, Ike 40. Should we keep an eye on those Patriots?
They were 7-7. Remember, they were 7-7 in 1974. They weren't that far off removed from looking decent. Everything just went wrong in 75.
Charles brings up a good point. We get over, especially nowadays, we get overhyped in talking about immediately after the draft how you're doing. We have the benefit of looking back 50 years and knowing that the Patriots pulled off one of the best drafts of the 70s here, and it wasn't talked about like some of the other ones. People talked about Cincinnati and Archie Griffin, and that didn't work out as well as they had planned. That's a good thing to look back on the draft from a perspective of several years down and see just exactly who won the draft. It might not be the team that's making all the headlines. All right, so we now move on to Monday, April 12th. And the Giants, stop me if you've heard this before, they made more signings. The Giants have been very busy this week. Sports Illustrated, we have Joe Morgan on the cover of the Cincinnati Reds. More about Sports Illustrated in the recap. And Football Digest, a huge story on broadcasters, guys like Frank Gifford, Pat Summerall, Kurt Gowdy, how are they rated, as well as their color commentators. Around the league, the New York Giants continue roster moves, adding depth across multiple positions, including the offensive line, receiver, and secondary. A clear sign that team building's through volume as camps approach. Sports Illustrated, this week's issue, delivers a deep, compelling feature on Jackie Jensen, a former football standout turned baseball star. Once an elite multi-sport athlete, Jensen's baseball career is revisited with a focus on his well-documented fear of flying. That fear ultimately reshaped and shortened a promising career. Also featured MLB scouting reports, Joe Morgan on the cover. Football's top announcer on Football Digest. A strong argument is made for Ray Scott as the best voice in football, and he's not even on TV. Scott's simple, no-nonsense delivery is praised as the purest form of play-by-play. Meanwhile, fan voting shows Frank Gifford leading, Don Meredith topping color commentary, and I didn't vote because obviously I would not be choosing Don Meredith. The growing divide is clear, television personality versus radio precision. Daily Takeaway, April 12th, shows us that football isn't just evolving on the field, it's evolving in how it's experienced. The voices behind the game are becoming just as important as the players themselves. Mark, what are your thoughts on the broadcast the way it's being presented with play-by-play and color commentary in the 1970s.
It's interesting to watch the game changing and seeing these people that played the game from the 50s and 60s and like Monday Night Football. It's a little quirky. It's not. I'm more of an old school person that just calls to play like it is, tells you what they're doing, shows you the replay, and shows you how they did it and was successful. I'm not a big fan of these people trying to make jokes out of football.
Then Frank Gifford best play man on American color commentary, and then of course Howard Cosell was in a class by itself.
I actually want to mention. I want to mention an irony. Don Meredith is actually at NBC in 1970. This was during his Monday Night Football hiatus. Actually, how easily you forget.
For the time being, yes.
Pre-Webster.
Moving on to Tuesday, April 13th. My negative third birthday, by the way. Negative 3.
My third birthday, Vinny.
Yep. The Giants are once again signing more players. And football news of the day: Miami punter Larry Seipel undergoes surgery. From more ex-Washington Gritter heads to the Rams as they sign quarterback Steve Hamilton, previously drafted by the Falcons, was released, so he's coming back in the league. Football Digest, first came Hallis and then Paul Brown. They look at Paul Brown's legendary career as he recently retired. Looking at April 13th, headlines of the day: major coaching era quietly closes. Paul Brown's legacy is reflected on. His innovation still shaping the game today. The Los Angeles Rams continue building depth, bringing in quarterback Steve Hamilton. Injury watch as Miami's punter Larry Seipel undergoes knee surgery, but is expected back for the 76th season. Rosters continue to take shape across the NFL. Teams are clearly emphasizing depth and versatility. Storylines to watch: the next generation versus the founders. As Paul Brown steps away, the question becomes who carries the torch of innovation next. Chris, your thoughts on Paul Brown? When he retired, we discussed it then, but now Football Digest, several months later, is taking an in-depth look at his career.
You know, we always like to hear about how guys change sports. Like Charles, you hear about how Babe Ruth changed baseball or how Lawrence Taylor changed the game for linebackers. Well, Paul Brown shaped a lot of stuff. And let's put it this way. When you guys got into football into the mid to late 80s, a lot of stuff that gets taken for granted nowadays, Paul Brown pretty much started a lot of that stuff you guys grew up on with coaching.
Yep. Definitely something to watch. And the Paul Brown coaching tree will continue to dominate and continue to fork through the next 50 years, even though nobody he actively employed is currently coaching, but it's guys that he employed who employed guys, and you can just trace it all back to Paul Brown.
Don Shula and Chuck Noll were players on his Browns.
And so was Lou Saban. On April 14th, Wednesday, we open up with a crossover story as St. Louis Cardinal and Oakland Raiders members Jim Bakken and Don Shinnick have accepted a challenge to play pro handball player Lou Russo.
Could that be a Super Bowl preview?
More NFL transactions as the Chiefs and Cardinals have made a deal. The Broncos and Cowboys are signing players. Let's take a look at the day overall. NFL players step outside the gridiron as Jim Bakken and Don Shinnick accept a handball challenge from pro Lou Russo. Chuck Munchley officially signs with the Saints, landing a major long-term deal. A notable defensive swap sees Kansas City and St. Louis exchange key pieces. Teams across the league continue adding depth and signings in Denver and Dallas. Around the league, New Orleans makes its biggest move yet, committing to Muncy as a cornerstone back. Kansas City and St. Louis execute a balanced defensive trade. Denver and Dallas continue building their roster. Did I read that twice? No, well. Building through commitment from Chuck Muncy's long-term deal to steady roster moves across the league, teams are clearly shifting from evaluation to identity building. Some days bring headlines, others quietly shape a season. Charles, Chuck Muncy is one of the first major draft names to sign. Is this going to create a domino effect as others get in before camp?
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, Walt Patulski was traded to St. Louis as part of the 76 seed. I can tell you now, he will not play at all in 76 because a few weeks before the year he injured his knee to the point where he has lost for the season.
Whoa.
Well, that sure is a shame for the Cardinals fans, and not you never know if he would have been hurt if he had stayed in Buffalo, but perhaps Buffalo definitely ends up winning that trade. We move on to Thursday, April 15th, Tax Day, and in 1976, I hope you got your taxes in if you were alive. None of us were. Denver's signing Norris Weiss from the Hawaiians of WFL.
Remember that name, Mark?
Yep, we got a mixture of college storylines, future pros, and familiar names are making headlines as some smaller news is happening. Heisman Trophy returned to Syracuse. That would be the trophy of Ernie Davis that disappeared in the 60s has come back. The pages of Football Digest on this day have the Redskins mortgage the future. We've been talking about it through most of the 70s. George Allen's need for veteran only, doesn't care about the draft. Football Digest is actually taking a look at what it could be doing to the Redskins beyond 1976.
In Allen's immortal words, the future is now.
This is a loaded day. Front office moves, college storylines, and one major philosophical debate shaping the NFL's future. Denver brings in quarterback Norris Weiss from the Hawaiians. Detroit adds quarterback Gary Danielson, wide receiver Ed Marshall, and defensive back Les Chavez. New Orleans lock in number 2 pick Tony Galbraith, so they're not just resting on signing Muncie, they're going after their entire draft.
Thunder and lightning.
The NFL teams are still mining WFL talent, aggressively reshaping rosters. College and future stars update. A lot of movement and intrigue at the college level. Glenn Ray emerging as QB1 at North Texas State. Meanwhile, after transferring in from Nebraska, Lucius Selman considering a return to football, potentially joining brothers Leroy and Dewey in Tampa Bay as a coach. Bubba Bean eager for pro football, even joking he'd take a WFL shot if needed. Of course, we know the WFL doesn't exist anymore, but Bubba Bean is not one to mince words when making jokes. Oklahoma defensive coordinator Larry Lacewell already feeling the loss of the Selman talent. Penn State and the Southwestern Conference schools building strong future scheduling ties late 70 matchup set. You can feel the pipeline building, and 76 and beyond is being shaped right here. The Heisman Trophy recovered. One of the more unique stories of the day, the 1961 Heisman Trophy, won by Ernie Davis, was returned to Syracuse, dropped off anonymously at the post office, now safely restored and back on display at Manley Fieldhouse, and yes, I've seen it. A strange but satisfying ending to a missing piece of college football history. Washington's gamble. The spotlight from Football Digest is have the Redskins mortgage their future. Coach George Allen continues his win now philosophy. It's the ultimate debate, building through youth or buying experience. And in 1976, the Redskins are all in on winning now. Football culture snapshot in the ads. You can learn to play quarterback from Joe Theismann. Coaching tapes from legends like Butkus and Staubach. Organized card collecting is already a thing and awesome. Football isn't just a sport here, it's a full lifestyle. April 15th shows us 3 key things. The NFL is evolving fast, thanks in part to the WFL fallout. College football is feeding the future pipeline, and team-building philosophy is becoming a real debate. Mark, there was a little piece in there about Penn State scheduling. They're an independent in 1976. They can schedule whoever they want. What are your thoughts on them signing games into the future in the late 70s?
Yeah, I like the idea that they can sign whoever they want. And Penn State, traditionally with Paterno now, has been ranked at or near the top at the end of the season. But two teams that will give you a challenge. And the Southwest Conference has some decent teams that will give you some of those challenges. Texas A&M. So there's some decent teams there that could challenge them, and you could see what you got early on.
And some of those games, Penn State will later schedule a home and home with Miami, the Notre Dame series in the 80s, and a long series with Alabama, which is going to come about in the 80s. So these signings will fully blossom in the 80s.
And on this April 15, 1976, the New York Yankees are finally back at the house that Ruth built and the city we built. First game of the newly renovated Yankee Stadium, Yankees came back from 4-0 down to beat the Twins 11-4.
Moving on to Good Friday, April 16th. The first post of the day looked at the Falcons' draft attitude changing as they picked up Sonny Collins from Kentucky and Bubba Bean from Texas A&M. College football needs spring games. We take a look at an opinion piece saying that they need to have 2 to 4 spring preseason or exhibition games against other schools and less reliance on these inter-squad scrimmages. The idea feels decades ahead of its time and still relevant today. That was the recap. No, that wasn't the recap. Then we take a look at Dick Butkus as he talks about how he's still bitter that his injury had ended his career early. Dallas is out there signing former Memphis
Danny
South Bend
White.
Danny White. Remember that name. And Football Digest this day, the quick quiz, one of Football Digest's favorite features. A really strong mix today, emotion, insight, and a little fan interaction. Let's run it back. Football perspective pieces, Falcons and college game. We skipped the hockey noise and zeroed in on football. If you look at that newspaper clipping, you can also read about hockey. The Falcons draft philosophy is shifting toward truly taking the best available player. Sonny Collins becomes a name to watch, talent mixed with questions. Meanwhile, there's a push for college football to embrace exhibition games, giving spring more purpose and fans more football. The day that shows how the game is evolving, at both the pro and college level. Dick Butkus still feeling the game. One of the most powerful pieces we've seen so far. Butkus openly admits he's still bitter over how things ended in Chicago, forced out by injury, battling the Bears off the field. Now channeling that intensity into injury prevention and a new life in acting. The Dallas Cowboys add Danny White, a small move that isn't so small in hindsight. Cowboys signed Danny White from the WFL, a versatile talent stepping into the shadow of Roger Staubach. Football Digest, the fan, this was fun. A full football quiz testing real football knowledge. A Mel Gray crossword puzzle that demanded time and dedication. Before fantasy leagues and instant stats, this is how fans lived the game. April 16th gave us a little bit of everything. The business side of football, the Falcons and Cowboys, the human side and Butkus story, and the fan side, the quizzes and crosswords. Charles, Dick Butkus, same with Gale Sayers. They were both drafted the same day. Their careers both ended early due to injury. And Butkus feels that the Bears and the NFL are not protecting their NFL alumni well in their post-career lives.
Have you ever started doing a pension plan by 1976?
That's a good question. I don't know. And especially how would you go about qualifying? I know that this was a huge topic in the 2000s, especially
And Charles, wasn't pension plans a key sticking point of the 94 baseball strike?
No, the key point in the 1972 baseball strike.
Saturday, April 17th, more transactions. The Buccaneers, Bears, and Redskins getting involved. From the pages of Football Digest, 21 points scored in 35 seconds. Chris, we know about the 21 the Bills scored in 77 seconds against the Broncos. This episode takes a look at how the New York Giants did it in just 35 seconds against who?
The Pittsburgh Steelers, although I thought this was during the war. I thought this was when they merged with the Eagles or the Cardinals. Remember, I think they were the Steagles or Card Pit.
A lighter day on the surface, but still some important building blocks across the league. Transactions lead the day. The biggest story is Tampa continuing to shape its identity as they sign the Selman brothers, officially making them Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Chicago adds depth of running back Bill Merrick and versatile Clarence Reese. Washington continues tapping into the WFL, signing wide receivers Robert Evans and James Thompson. The league vibe, this was a foundation day in the NFL. Expansion teams, Tampa especially, defining who they are. No headlines, but real impact. April football 1976 isn't about games, it's about decisions. But we're going to take a little break from football as Mark has something special to talk about that happened on April 17th, 1976.
Yeah, on April 17th, 1976, and this will shock you, Charles. Philadelphia Phillies travel to Chicago Cubs. They're taking on the Cubs.
Yep.
After 4 innings, the Cubs were up 13-2.
Yeah.
Michael Schmidt then went 4 for 4 with 4 home runs the rest of the way. They rallied from 13-2 down to tie that game up at 15-15, and they won it 18-16 after 10 innings.
Jim Longboy got the save in that one. And also, Bob Boone, they hit a game-tying home run in the 9th inning to tie it. And then the Phils scored 2 at the top of the ninth. And good thing because the Cubs scored twice in the bottom of the ninth. We tying it, setting the stage for Schmidt's 4th straight home run.
Just
another day at the office when the wind's blowing out of Wrigley.
Yep.
Yes. especially in mid-April. It usually doesn't blow out that early.
And just 2 days earlier, the same day that the Yankees these new ran at ballpark, the Mets Dave Kingman hit one out to Sheffield Avenue at estimated 500 plus feet.
And ironically, he'll outdo himself a couple years later in Wrigley.
Yep.
I thought we were talking baseball. I didn't realize the Eagles and Bears took part in a field goal battle, 15-15. Holy
Actually,
crap.
that's about a perfect score for a 1976 game.
Yeah. Moving on to Sunday, April 18th, San Diego and St. Louis are going to play an exhibition game in Tokyo. More on that later. Washington signing Walt Tullis and place kicker Gary Homer.
Don't.
And the Football Digest is taking a look at the game I'll never forget as Ed Podolak goes back to Christmas Day in 1971. A quieter day on the surface, but underneath some fascinating movement in pro football and its growing global reach. The Washington Redskins add depth and signings, cornerback Walt Tullis, kicker Gary Homer. Small moves, but at this time of the year, it's all about building rosters. Chris had a piece on the Cardinals and Chargers heading to Tokyo. NFL football drawing 65+ thousand fans overseas. That's the goal. Football Digest took a look at Ed Podolak reflecting on the 82-minute, 40-second longest game ever played that ended with a Garo Yepremian game-winning field goal. Podolak's line says it all. He'd trade all 350 yards for that win. That's football in its purest form. Production means nothing without victory. From the ads, we got fans in 76 could order Super Bowl films on 8mm reels. They could buy their team history books or store their collections in official Digest binders. Being a fan wasn't passive. You had to chase the game down and bring it home. April 18th shows 3 different layers of football: roster building, global expansion, and Podolak's unforgettable loss. Chris, the game in Japan is actually bigger news in the historical perspective than it felt in 1976.
Yes, because this was because there were future remember the American Bowls. Mark, your Broncos. In fact, all of our teams, the Broncos, the Niners, and the Bills, are participating in these American Bowls. And Charles, the Niners, if you remember, played the first regular season game outside of America in 2005 against the Cardinals. And by the way, note the 8mm thing. Remember, we're still a year away from the VCR.
We are in the VCR era. It began in 1975.
Yeah, it's really expensive, though. You'll start to see it in game collectors. It doesn't really explode until 77 when the prices started to come down.
I believe it.
Monday, April 19th, we take a look at Football Digest, takes a look at Jan Stenerud, reflecting on some painful moments of his career. The NFL is going to give replay a try. And it's Monday.
There's another thing that you forgot to mention, that story that I think should be mentioned. The NFL is going to move its schedule back because they don't want to, because they want to avoid playing on Christmas. And we were talking about Jan Stenerud at Podolak, not just the playoff game 71. You remember the fallout because it was on Christmas Day?
Yep. Sports Illustrated hits the news shelves for its dated Monday. Usually hits a little earlier, but we'll always go over it on Monday. The cover athlete is Ray Floyd as he wins the Masters with a score of 17 under par. But in football, there's a huge piece, not just football, but all sports, in prayer in sports. And it continues to be a debate today. When Tim Tebow was kneeling in the end zone, people were complaining. Prayer in sports has always been there. And in 1976, Sports Illustrated took a big look at it. The NFL takes a step towards the future, approving a trial run of instant replay. Designed for unclear or disputed calls, limited by available camera angles, officials still retain final authority. At this stage, replay is viewed as experimental, something for the preseason, but it signals the beginning of a major shift in how the game will eventually be officiated. Jan Stenerud says he can't help but remember his missed late field goal in the game against the Dolphins, that longest playoff game. He reflects on the miss, not with anger, but with the weight of knowing how small moments define outcomes. We take a look at more ads, mail order sports materials and publications, guide for aspiring broadcasters, classified, connecting fans to the game. Being a fan wasn't instant. You had to seek it out, collect it, and stay connected. Sports Illustrated, the game beyond the game. This week's issue steps outside the field and into culture. A deep look at faith and athletics, the growing presence of religion in locker rooms and team environments, questions about identity, influence, and the role and belief in competition. April 19th shows football in 3 directions at once. Instant replay testing the future, Stenrud looking back, and the modern game when it comes to prayer. Mark, let's take a look at that instant replay idea in 1976. When you think instant replay, you probably don't go that far back.
No, you just got to go back to 1972 and the Immaculate Reception. And I think that play is the single reason why they probably should go and bring instant replay in. I'd love to go slow that down by today's standards and go frame by frame just to see, A, did he touch the ball or was the collision? And B, did it touch the turf? You've never seen a clear cut definitive answer on that.
And I'm going to also just mention the play that's mentioned in that thing, and we discussed this heavily in 75, the Mel Gray touchdown or non-touchdown.
Tuesday, April 20th, the NFL and NFLPA resuming talks. Fran Tarkenton signs an extension to stay with the Vikings for 2 more years. The Vikings, Buccaneers, Broncos, and Redskins are at it, signing more players. The Jets are going to play a preseason game in Yankee Stadium. And from Football Digest, we get a snapshot of league in motion, coaching changes, front office moves. Among the notable notes, the Eagles turning to Mike McCormick, the 49ers hiring Monty Clark, the Bengals hiring Bill Johnson,
Tiger Johnson.
Yeah. Major moves in the Northwest is Jack Patera is headed to Seattle. These are all in the pages of Football Digest. But the big headline of the day, the Vikings secure their franchise quarterback. The Vikings lock in stability at the most important position, signing Fran Tarkenton to a 2-year contract. Tarkenton remains the centerpiece of a Minnesota team still chasing that elusive Super Bowl title. NFL transactions continue to shape rosters. The Buccaneers stay active, adding a wave of players to evaluate heading into their inaugural season. The Broncos add linebacker Larry Lee. The Redskins bring in guard John Culpepper. The foundation of the 76 season is being laid one signing at a time. The Jets are going to be playing a preseason game at Yankee Stadium. Their preseason schedules come out. The Giants on the 9th, the Raiders on the 13th, and the Redskins on the 28th. A throwback to when NFL teams brought the game into iconic venues and big city stages. Football Digest took a look at the coaching movement. The expansion Seahawks prepare beginning to building their identity. The big picture, April 20th, is about structure and stability. Franchise quarterback staying put. Charles, the Vikings continue to keep Fran Tarkenton on their roster. Is this going to be a key factor in them getting to Super Bowl 11?
Yes, it will be.
He was the MVP last year.
And going back to how expensive VCRs were in 1976, the tailing cost between $1,000 and $1,500. The first standalone Betamax machines cost approximately $2,000.
I wonder what that would be in modern dollars.
$5,000 to $7,500.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
April 21st. That would be a Wednesday. The Packers are talking about how they've struggled on the field, but off it, business is booming. Shareholders posted a net profit of $784,000, so they're not winning, but they're making money up in Green Bay. The WFL fallout continues as more players are signing around the league. The Miami Dolphins bringing in Bob Lally, so they did sign a Memphis Southman, just not one of the ones they had lost. Football Digest taking a look at the stars and statistics as O.J. Simpson broke Gale Sayers' touchdown record and more in the pages of Football Digest. All right, April 21st wasn't just a stats day. It was a snapshot full of football. From stars to business to movement across the league. The numbers told the story. O.J. Simpson, 23 touchdowns, breaking Gale Sayers' record. Ken Anderson, commanding the air. Fran Tarkenton leading the NFC. Chuck Foreman, redefining versatility. Every phase of the game, it wasn't just offense. Jan Stenerud, Ray Guy, and Mel Blount were locking things down. Even Walter Payton was contributing. Packers off the field. They're struggling on the field, but financially, they're profiting. Under Bart Starr, the wins weren't there yet, but the foundation was strong. Teams staying active. The Broncos bringing wide receivers John Schultz and defensive back Bruce Beeman. The Redskins signed linebacker Eddie Sheets, and the Seahawks signed linebacker Ernie Richardson. Bob Lally from the WFL's Memphis Southman signs with Miami. Before shopping, this was fandom. In Football Digest, you could order for team pins, jewelry, collectibles, instant replay record albums. You didn't click buy now. You waited weeks to get that in the mail.
A lot of 4 6 weeks for delivery.
April 21st shows us everything. Star power on the field, business growth behind the scenes, player movement shaping rosters. Chris, many people wonder how the Packers have stayed in Green Bay so long. Well, we get a look at here from the newspapers. They're making money in 76, even losing.
Imagine how much money they'd be making if they were actually finishing with winning records. I mean, if they're doing this well and they're losing games, God only knows how high that profit would be once they actually win games.
Moving on to Wednesday, April 21st. The NFL releases its schedule. The season is going to open on September 12th in one of the big games, Steelers and Raiders. Once again, you can take a look at the full schedule posted on Pigskin Glory on Facebook. And in football fodder, the Steelers, we talk about the schedule. The Lions are going to share their stadium, or moving into the Superdome. Sorry, the Lions are playing in the Superdome, the Seahawks in the Kingdome, the Saints in the Silverdome, so Dome's a big part. The Jets open up 4 straight road games due to sharing Shea Stadium with the Mets. The Giants also start with 4 on the road as they are be playing their games in New Jersey. The Raiders face 5-game road stretch because of conflicts with the baseball's A's. In Football Digest, we can look back. The current schedule is released in newspapers, but in Football Digest, you can take a look at the results from the 75 schedule. Okay, the NFL schedule is front and center today, giving fans their first real look at how the 76 season will unfold. It's packed with storylines right before a single snap is played. The road to a third straight Super Bowl for Pittsburgh begins where it left off in Oakland. The defending champions will open the season against the Raiders on the road, the very team they defeated in the AFC Championship game. The full 76 schedule reveals a league-adjusting change. With the addition of Tampa and Seattle, both franchises begin their journeys with unique paths, each set to face every team within their respective conference once, a true trial by fire of expansion football. And remember, the Buccaneers are in the AFC, the Seahawks in the NFC in 76. The Jets will open the 4 straight road games, sharing Shea with the Mets. The Giants will also open on the road as their new stadium in New Jersey nears completion. The Raiders face a lengthy road stretch due to conflicts with the A's. Under the lights, Monday Night Football returns, Miami traveling to Buffalo on September 13th. From week 1 alone delivers a full slate of intrigue. Baltimore at New England, Denver at Cincinnati, Detroit at Chicago, Minnesota at New Orleans, San Francisco at Green Bay, and of course the Steelers Raiders. From the pages of Football Digest, we look back at the 1975 results with some hidden nuggets. Detroit is scheduled to play 9 indoor games in 76, leaning heavily into the dome advantage. Expansion teams, Tampa Bay and Seattle, are fully integrated into conference play. The big picture, April 22nd, is about anticipation. The matchups are set, the paths are defined, and Mark, the NFL now with 28 teams is stepping into a new era of growth and complexity.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how things play out, and I can't wait to see how this upcoming season will fold with all these, like you said, all these big storylines opening up right away.
By the way, Mark, your respective teams, 2 tough openers on the road.
Yeah, I think the Steelers playing those Raiders opening day is going to tell a lot about both teams. Steelers have owned the Raiders for the last couple years, but if the Raiders ever want to make a statement, it would be here. They are finally at home for this. They are not on the road in Three Rivers. So what a way to make a statement if the Raiders can pull this out. If the Steelers pull it out, it'll just be business as usual for them.
Don't sleep on Denver at Cincinnati. Again, Archie Griffin, Coy Bacon. Denver, a lot of bad luck last year.
Yep. Moving on to Friday, April 23rd. Again, we've got some transactions. Tampa and San Diego, Chicago, the Jets, Denver, all making moves. Nobody's seen that. Okay, one of the clips I posted just started playing. From the pages of Football Digest, it takes a look at records set and tied in 76. We're running toward the end of Football Digest, so the stories aren't there, but some of the interesting nuggets that are hidden in the back of the book. All right, let's take a look at the day. Main storylines. The schedule's now set. Attention shifts fully to roster construction. Expansion franchises remain especially aggressive. Tampa Bay continue to assembling their inaugural roster, adding wide receiver help. The San Diego Chargers make multiple moves, including adding protection and special teams pieces. The Jets bring in a large group of players, one of the biggest roster influxes of the week. The Bears and Broncos continue building depth across multiple positions. This is the grind of the offseason. Names being added now could become contributors in the fall. Football Digest taking a look at records set and tied. George Blanda continues to dominate the all-time scoring and kicking records, not to mention just continuing to play is part of it too. Fran Tarkenton stands atop the passing world. O.J. Simpson remains a benchmark for offensive production. On the team side, the numbers reinforce what we already know. The Steelers sit atop the league with their championship run. The NFL record book is being shaped heavily by multi-role legends like Blanda. Quarterback play especially continues to evolve, with Tarkenton redefining consistency. April 23rd is about balance, looking back at a historic 1975 season filled with records and building forward with transactions. Charles, when you look back at the records set in 1975, what stands out most to you?
Get back to me on that one.
All right, what about you, Chris? What's your thoughts on the record set in 75?
Probably OJ breaking a lot of the scoring records. I mean, he didn't rush for 2,000 yards, but in terms of scoring and receiving yards, in some ways he outdid 1973.
Okay. Moving on to Saturday, April 24th, we have the Redskins and Rams making some transactions from the pages of Football Digest, the answers to that quiz. The league keeps inching forward through the offseason. Today's movement gives us another glimpse at how rosters are quietly being shaped. The Redskins add depth in the trenches, signing center Jay Corsi. Out west, the Rams made a pair of additions, wide receiver Glenn Cotton, defense back Pat Manis. The Rams continue to tweak both sides of the ball, looking to stay competitive in a tough NFC landscape that's coming off a Super Bowl run by Dallas and continued pressure from Minnesota. Between the lines, this is a kind of day that doesn't dominate headlines but matters. Teams are filling gaps, not making splashes. Depth signings now often become contributors by October. Moves like these remind us how different rosters building looked in the 70s. No free agency frenzy, no massive contracts, just steady additions, scouting and development. Championships were often built on names that barely made April headlines. Another day closer to kickoff, and every name added now could echo. Mark, what are your thoughts on some of these smaller moves in the big picture of how the season will unfold?
I think I think smaller moves can be are quiet. They're not as talked about, and I think they can be game changers. Everyone talks about a big blockbuster trade, but just like the NFL draft, I think a small move can be a huge upgrade for one team.
Let me give you an example, Mark. Jeremiah Castile, he's probably one of the lesser talked about Broncos, but he made one of the biggest plays in your team's history.
Yes.
You know, when you think about that, I remember the Buffalo Bill player in 1995 named David White, who you might not think of unless you're a diehard fan that remembers everything like I do. He made a key interception in the game against the Dolphins that I have an unused ticket for that helped win the Bills the AFC East in 95.
Last division title for 25 years.
On Sunday, April 25th, we're nearing the end of the month. I know Mark's going to have to leave soon, so let's try and finish up. The Jets and Colts. The Colts signing Burt Jones to a multi-year contract. The Jets making some moves. Football Digest, we're ending the issue with the final ads and the back page, a smoking ad. 1976 is wild. We wrap up the week with a strong focus on the most important position in football, quarterback. Today's headlines. The Jets officially lock in their future, signing their Richard Todd to a multi-year deal. Meanwhile, the Colts secure their present by signing Burt Jones to a contract extension. Two teams, two timelines. The Jets invest in potential and development. The Colts double down on proven excellence. Both approaches highlight how critical the quarterback play has become. Football Digest closes out the April issue with the final ads and the back page. On the same day we see teams invest heavily in quarterbacks, we're reminded that the NFL is a business built on fan connection. Through merchandise, media, and marketing, the game is growing, not just on the field, but in living rooms across the country. April 25th brings the week to a close with clarity. Franchises are choosing their leaders, and fans are choosing their teams. And the NFL continues steady evolution. Charles, what about these signings of Richard Todd and the extension of Burt Jones stand out from a fan perspective?
Give the fans of those teams hope. And speaking of was that same day, April 25th in Los Angeles, the Cubs wrecked Monday. Saw two protesters trying to burn U.S. flag, and then Wreck Monday grabbed it just before the idiots could set the flag ablaze.
The
It was a
scoreboard.
huge anniversary that was still remembered this year and talked about. I happened to be watching the Braves broadcast that day, and it was brought up on their telecast.
And the scoreboard said, Rick Monday, great play.
Moving on to Monday, April 26th, around the sports world, we have a Hall of Fame, but not the NFL. It is a Polish Hall of Fame, and Ted Marchibroda, the former head coach of the Baltimore Colts, is among the names being inducted. 7 MIAC players in Vikings camps. That's the Minnesota Intercollegiate Athletic Conference, sending 7 players to Minnesota camps for the spring. You have the Colts busy doing more work. They re-signed Burt Jones. The Jets signing Schaefer Suggs, defensive back. Sports Illustrated this Monday, and Yvonne have Chris Everett's number. The cover girl is Yvonne Gulagang. But inside the issue, there is some stuff in football. As the Tampa Bay storyline over nepotism or not is head coach John McKay signed his son J.K. McKay. There's some books, Baseball Business Insight, and they said it, snapshot of the era. One quote jumps off the page from Houston drafting prospect Mike Barber. Looking back at the full day, Monday gives us one of those great snapshot of the world days. NFL transactions, quiet but important. The league ledger saw a couple key signings. We talked about Burt Jones on Sunday. Jets adding Schaefer Suggs. No blockbuster headlines, but these are the kinds of moves that shape rosters long before the season starts. The Sports Illustrated thing we talked about. The college pipeline is the MIAC sending 7 players to Minnesota. Chris, the big picture on this, not a big day when it comes to the NFL, but there's a lot of little things going on as April's coming to a close.
Yes, you got these Minnesota guys, the Burt Jones sign, which when you win 9 games in a row, I think you deserve a little extra payday. And the playoffs are also in full swing. I think Charles's Warriors are still trying to defend their championship, and the A's, well, they're still trying to just keep their thing going for now.
1 more year to be exact.
Starting on Tuesday, April 27th, the Browns making roster moves. Around the league, Heisman Trophy winner Archie Griffin has a decision to make, as the Montreal Alouettes have also trying to negotiate a contract with him. So Cincinnati may not have secured the 2-time Heisman Trophy winner. Quieter day on the surface, but one that still gives us movement. Both the NFL and roster shuffling is many career decisions in the offseason. The Cleveland Browns trimmed their roster with Ken Brown and Jack Lebeck, both clearing waivers and entering the free agent pool. So I was wrong when I said they were signing players. They're actually releasing players. Archie Griffin, 2-time Heisman Trophy winner, has options. He has spoken with the Montreal Alouettes to join the CFL, and the Bengals still have the negotiating power as they hold his NFL ownership. Classic 70s storyline, NFL versus CFL leverage with a marquee college star in the middle of it. April 27th is a familiar offseason rhythm. Teams continue to fine-tune rosters at the margins. Young stars like Griffin are deciding where and how they'll enter the pro game. Mark, what are your thoughts on if Archie Griffin takes his 2 Heisman trophies to Montreal?
Yeah, that's a shocker. I don't know much about the history prior to this. I don't know how many Heismans that went to up to Canada. There might have been 1 or 2, but usually they go straight in the NFL and make a name for themselves.
Two notable. Vinny, you might know this. Heisman runner-up Joe Theismann went from Notre Dame to Toronto Argonauts.
Yep. He had been drafted by the Miami Dolphins, but for whatever reason, didn't make the cut or the roster in 71. Was it 71?
Yeah, it was 71. He went to Grey Cup, lost on the fumble, and as it turned out, Earl Morrill ended up taking his job, and, well, you know how that went.
Yep. I think that worked out for Theismann in the long run, though. Wednesday, April 28th, the offseason tension is starting to build as Sam Bam Cunningham is under contract uncertainty with the New England Patriots. Let's take a look at the more roster movement. The Raiders add depth as they re-sign Charlie Smith. The NFL Montreal Alouettes make a special teams move as they sign kicker Don Sweet, adding interest to track the CFL alongside the NFL, especially with talent and opportunities. Even in late April, building blocks of the 76 season are being put into place. Chris, any thoughts on the Raiders signing Charlie Smith?
That's actually a notable one because if you remember the Heidi game, it was Charlie Smith who scored the first of those touchdowns that everyone famously didn't. When they scored those 2 touchdowns in like 10 seconds, it was Charlie Smith who scored the go-ahead touchdown before the Jets fumbled the kickoff.
And the way they're the biggest bridesmaids in the NFL the last 10 years are looking to finally cap the bouquet.
Looks like I posted that out of order. There's also a post on the NFL blackout policy, as U.S. Senator John O. Pastor has declared the NFL is allowed to continue using its current TV blackout, meaning you have to be within a sellout within a certain amount of time. Host on the Tomorrow Show with Tom Snyder, he's going to have on former NFL running back and openly gay Dave Kope, which is big news in 76 for any football player, past or present, to admit that, as John Brody will also be interviewed. Daily recap. I kind of touched on the recap earlier. Sam Cunningham's contract in peril, the transactions with the Raiders and the Alouettes, the TV blackout. Charles, the big news on the TV blackout is that if you don't sell out within 72 hours or live within a 2-hour drive or something, there's probably mileage, you don't get to see the game in your hometown.
No. It's the story in 1974. Before that, you wouldn't get a chance to see the game at all, even if it was sold out months in advance.
Vinny, I'll give you a couple of examples. One of the biggest wins in Buffalo Bills history was blacked out locally in Buffalo when they finally beat Miami in 1980.
So was the Immaculate Reception game. My dad had to drive to a hotel in St. Clairsville, Ohio to see that game.
It was not sold out.
It was blacked out. He was blacked out. My dad.
Well, that was the 72 blackout rules, though, where all home games are blacked out.
Which sounds ridiculous. Like,
it was a playoff game. It was crazy when my dad told me he had to drive like an hour and a half to a small hotel, rent a room just to see the game. Never stayed the night. They went back home. But that's how much that game meant to my dad and to some of his friends at that time.
71 Chiefs, the double overtime Christmas game. That game was blacked out locally in Kansas City.
Thursday.
Probably fortunate that no dinners were burned in Kansas City.
Well, you still have the radio, but all home games before 75 are blacked out in the NFL. Moving on to Thursday, April 29th, the Atlanta Falcons and the Patriots and Raiders making roster moves. We have a psychiatrist in San Diego who's being investigated over giving players drugs, amphetamines, to members of the Chargers, citing concerns over what they were already taking. And we have a passing. We pause to remember J. Howard Berry, former player for the Rochester Jeffersons in 1921, All-American fullback at Penn. Taking a look at the day in total, Atlanta continues shaping their future, signing multiple players, including Sonny Collins, their second-round draft pick. And the Raiders and Patriots make a trade as Leon McQuay is sent to Oakland for a future draft pick. The Chargers are involved in a drug controversy as a more serious story emerges involving San Diego as a psychiatrist claims he supplied amphetamines to players in prior seasons. The NFL has ordered the teams to cut ties with him. 8 players are fined for violations tied to 1973. Remembering a pioneer, J. Howard Berry, former Rochester Jeffersons player from the 1921 season, has passed away. He also was an All-American at Penn. April 29th captures the NFL on multiple levels. Teams continuing to build toward the future, league confronting serious off-field issues. Chris, what are your thoughts on this psychiatrist being the one to bring this to light, as he was the one that did it?
Well, it's kind of crazy when you look back on the idea of drug, but here's the thing. In 1973, the Chargers were 2-11-1. You think maybe that might have had something to do with it? You think the drugs may have affected their performance?
Not sure, but it's definitely something to take a look at. On Friday, April 30th, the last day of the month, the NFL players are gaining freedom tomorrow. Among the notable players, Roman Gabriel, John Riggins, Ron Jefferson, John Gilliam, Ahmad Rashad from Buffalo, Gene Fugit, Fred Dreyer, the Hunter, and Ken Ellis. We'll take a look more at that in May.
Ahmad Rashad was a Buffalo Bill. I thought of him as a Viking.
Yeah, he started out as under a different name when he was with the Buffalo Bills, but he did change his name to Ahmad Rashad.
And he once caught a 98-yard pass with the Cardinals, the longest non-touchdown catch in NFL history.
We have the Saints. They're making some signings, and of course, more info on the Patriots and Raiders trade. The dawn of NFL free agency, a landmark moment unfolding amongst the 23 NFL players set to enter. As the Rozelle rule has been struck down, players now have the ability to negotiate and move on freely. Notable names potentially available include Roman Gabriel, John Riggins, and Ahmad Rashad. This is still in its infancy, but its early foundation. Transactions continue as the Saints signed defense back Maurice Spencer to a multi-year deal. April 30th highlights a fascinating contrast. On one side, history is being made, with free agency opening up. On the other, the league still isn't transforming overnight. There's still a long way to go. This isn't just an offseason date. This is one of the first real steps forward toward player empowerment, contract leverage, and the modern NFL structure. And that brings me to my closing segment. Free agency. You know, as we close out April 1976, there's one thing hanging over the entire football world heading into May. Free agency. Now, let's be clear here. What arrived on May 1st is not what fans think today when they hear that term. This isn't the 1993 unrestricted free agency. This is where stars jump overnight. It's not even the NFL's Plan B, which happens in the 1980s. What we're seeing here is the very first crack in the wall, and honestly, I think it's needed. Now, I was never on Joe Cap's side completely. I understood why owners pushed back against what he wanted. Football teams aren't just collecting of random players. He walked away from his contract, and the jury sided with the NFL. Franchises need stability. Fans build connections to players and teams over years. The idea of total unrestricted movement in the 70s probably would have created chaos. But at the same time, players deserve something. Before the owners basically held all the power, a player could finish his contract and still not truly be free. In other professions, that sounds crazy, and eventually players were going to challenge it. So what arrives in May 1976 feels almost cautious, limited, controlled. 20-something players entering a market that teams are still afraid to even use. But it matters because the first time the idea exists. John Riggins can listen to offers. John Gilliam will leave Minnesota for Atlanta. Players suddenly have at least a little leverage. And once leverage enters sports, everything changes. That's why I find this moment fascinating. Not because 1976 free agency was huge. Honestly, by modern standards, it's tiny. But history doesn't always announce itself with fireworks, and sometimes it starts quieter in the newspaper. And 50 years later, we can look back and realize this was the beginning of modern NFL business era. We'll see. Now that April's done, I'm going to go around real quick. Mark is heading to work. He's already given us his report on April 17th, the big baseball game. Chris, what stands out to you in April of 1976?
The schedule coming out, the draft, the Bucks, the Seahawks, and you wonder if Seattle's going to regret not taking Muncie, because I know they've got, when you're expansion team, you got to have something. Like Tampa has their star in Solomon. Seattle needs somebody to get excited about.
And Charles, give us your baseball report for April 1976.
Well, in addition to the regular stuff I showed you, Mike Smith's full hold was part of 11 to lead the league going into May 1st, and tied with Dave King with 20 RBIs. In the standings, the Mets have a 2-game lead over the Phillies after April 30th. The Reds lead LA and the Astros by a game in the West. The Yankees, with 10-3 start, had game ahead of Milwaukee. The Red Sox, last year's pennant winners, 6-7 and 5th place. And the Rangers won up on Oakland with the Royals 5-7 to start the season. That's on the baseball side. And then on the basketball side, in the NBA, the Golden State Warriors, after beating the Pistons in the conference semifinals, will play the Phoenix Suns in the conference finals in the West. And in the East, it'll be the Boston Celtics against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Because after Boston defeated, the Buffalo Braves in the conference semifinals. Sorry about that, Vinny. And the last year of the ABA, the American Basketball Association, it'll be the Kentucky Colonels and it'll be the Denver Nuggets and the New York Nets playing in the final, which will start on May 1st. And the NHL going into May 1st. The Montreal Canadiens lead the Islanders 2-0. The Bruins and Flyers tied at 1 game apiece.
And the World Hockey Association is still kicking.
Yep. And a matter of fact, going on April 30th, the Houston Aeros Well, beat the San Diego Mariners. That name spills right out of the top of your tongue, doesn't it? In 6 games.
All right, so as we end April of 1976, football is continuing to move forward. Thank you for joining us this month, this month on Pigskin Glory. We still got a few more months of the offseason. There's no football digest in May, so we won't have any of that as they were a 10-month publication. But until next month, we will see you at minicamp.